Very warm welcome to everybody. Respected Shri Krishnan sir, Raj Lakshmi, CA Kinjal Shah, Joint Treasurer now and Joint Secretary elect for Bombay Chartered Accountant Society for the coming year. Friends, it's my distinct pleasure to welcome you all to this pivotal session on obligation of chartered accountants under the Money Laundering Act. As a president of Bombay Chartered Accountant Society, I am deeply honored to address such a distinguished gathering of professionals who play a critical role in upholding the integrity and transparency of our financial systems. In this era where financial crimes are becoming increasingly sophisticated, the role of chartered accountant has never been more crucial. We are not just custodian of financial accuracy and compliance, we are frontline defenders against the scourge of money laundering. The PMLA lays down stringent requirements that demand our utmost diligence, ethical standards, and proactive engagement. Today, I am sure we will delve into various facets of our responsibility under the PML, exploring how we can effectively contribute to the global fight against money laundering and terrorist financing. Our discussion will encompass the legal framework, the practical challenges we face, and the best practices we can adopt to ensure compliance while safeguarding the interest of our client and integrity of our profession. As we navigate through this complex issue, I would definitely encourage all of you to actively engage, share your insight, and raise the concerns you might have. I would like to also extend my gratitude to NISM, who we are doing jointly with, and the Bombay Chartered Accountant Society and NISM are doing the jointly event today. I would also like to extend my gratitude to our esteemed speaker, who brings the wealth of knowledge and experience to this session, sir. This insight will undoubtedly provide us the deeper understandings of our obligations and the tool necessary to fulfill them effectively. Let us all seize this opportunity to strengthen our resolve and reaffirm our commitment to the ethical practice and compliance. Together, we can make a significant impact in the fight against money laundering and ensure that our profession continues to be the beacon of trust and integrity. Thank you all of us, and I look forward against it. Since we have a lot of non-members registered, we have more than 1,000 plus registrations incoming, which clearly shows the importance of this topic of PMLA and the obligation of chartered accountants under this PMLA. Friends, I would also like you all to introduce to Bombay Chartered Accountant Society. BCS is India's largest and oldest voluntary body of professionals of chartered accountancy, with a membership exceeding 10,000 and spread across 350 cities and towns in India today. BCS is an unwavering in its commitment in development of profession since 1949 and in its 75th year of existence. Our core mission is to provide our members with extensive opportunity for growth and advancement through a multifaceted approach encompassing learning events like such lecture meetings, networking, publication, RRCs, and a lot of other events which we do during the year. The BCS relies on dedicated effort of hundreds of volunteers who selflessly contribute their time and expertise while upholding shared values and professional ethics. A pioneering thought leader and an enabler in the community, BCS continues to play a pivotal role in strengthening the accounting, tax, and economic fibre of India. We also have our monthly journal called BCAJ, which is the most sought after monthly publication which lasts 5 decades. BCS extensive outreach towards nation building is bolstered with its detailed representation to regulator and government authority. So with all this, I would wish all of you a wonderful, productive session today. And thank you, Krishnan, for accepting our invitation and to share your knowledge with all our members and NISM. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Siraj sir. So now I will give you a brief introduction about today's speaker. So it's my pleasure to introduce you all to today's distinguished speaker, Mr. Krishnan Viswanathan. Mr. Krishnan is a seasoned financial services professional with diverse experience in operations, technology, enterprise risk, compliance, and internal control. He has worked in multiple areas of financial services like custodial services, asset management, companies, IT services, exchange, and international banks. He has held senior positions in MNC organizations like ABN AMRO, Alliance Capital, Barclays, Deutsche Bank, JP Morgan, Zurich Financial, apart from domestic majors like L&T, MCX, and SHCIL. Mr. Krishnan is the Chief Executive Officer of Chris Consulting, a unique boutique of risk advisory and assurance firm. Within a short span of time, Krish Consulting has evolved as a credible and dominant partner for organizations in the areas of risk, compliance, and audit. Mr. Krishnan works closely with marquee industry leaders in developing enterprise risk framework, information security, cyber and BCP framework, fraud, anti-money laundering, etc. Mr. Krishnan curated courses for leading management institutes like XLRI and BIM. As knowledge partner of NISL, Mr. Krishnan has developed masterclass in AML called CALM and short courses in the areas of securities market, KYC, and customer due diligence and transaction monitoring and reporting. Mr. Krishnan also serves as an independent director in a listed entity heading the risk management and cyber risk committees. Mr. Krishnan is a postgraduate in commerce, cost accountant, a law graduate apart from the certification from international agencies in the areas of risk, fraud, AML, and money laundering. He is currently a doctoral research scholar in ERM enrolled in University of Mumbai. Sir, I welcome you and I request you to lead the way from here.
Thank you, Rajalakshmi. It was quite a flattering welcome, and Mr. Chirag, Mr. Kinjal, and the entire BCAS fraternity. All the participants, members of BCAS and non-members as well, wish you all a very happy evening. And for those of you in Mumbai and surrounding, I hear it's going to be a very pleasant Friday, walking into a good weekend. So it's at 4 to 5 is sort of a from that perspective, not a great stuff to have, but still to see about 130 people on this, and I don't know how many more on the LinkedIn. So sort of very pleasantly overwhelmed to be, to say the least about it. And Raji, I'm not able to share the screen. Can you help me with this? So that was a little, these are all something about Chris Consulting and myself, which has been fairly well covered. Thank you very much about it. Yeah, Chris Consulting is about 5 years old into entire suite of consulting and advisory services. Before we get in, let me set in the context of this, right? I really, the idea is to give you a background of the importance of money laundering. It is like, of late, it is like fairly well known. People are aware of it. I'll set the context of it a little bit about what money laundering is, that not more than 30 seconds or so. Then we will dwell largely into what the chartered accountants or the people with certificate of professionals need to do, right? More as the obligations. And subsequently, whatever is your questions, we will take care. If anything to do with the specifically with respect to chartered accountants, I think we have the leading people from BCAS as well to step in and also advise on this. So I'm also looking at with every training program that I conduct. I think in the past 3 years or so, I'd easily address over 5,000 people over multiple days to an hour like this as well, across all these things, thousands of people. Everything is a learning experience for me. So I hope to fulfill your expectations on this Friday evening. First and foremost, just take a quick look at this. This is $52 billion worth of fine and penalties that have been levied as of 2021. And guess what? We are in the year 2024, and this has gone up to over $66 billion, right? So these are all $1 billion in penalties, right? And overall, it is estimated that about 2 to 5% of the global GDP represents the amount that is where that represents the money laundered throughout the world. When you're talking of 2 to 5% of a GDP of about close to $105 trillion, it easily stacks up in the first 5 economies of the world, even much larger than India itself, right? So you can also see that you have seen some very big names, right? Normally, typically associated like the likes of JP Morgan, UBS, BNP Paribas, you name it. It doesn't mean that these are all small-time banks having poor systems and procedures. It is really very big banks with lots of presence. We've got over 220 odd individuals who have been fined, which is very important to note. It is just not the organizations we are talking about, but also the people behind it. So why are we here specifically talking of in terms of the context? This is basically basically snippets from the various news articles, right, in the public domain. Very clearly says that where it is just not the realm of banking and financial services as the people who should be worried about it. It is also going into the areas of accounting, as Mr. Chirag very clearly said in his inaugural address, saying that as frontline defense, there is a role to play as far as accountants are concerned. Absolutely. You can see that the accountancy firms in the UK, $3.2 million money laundering fines, right? And you can see that there are bankers have been jailed for stealing $390,000 from customers, actually colluding with some of the bankers, largely to do with the vulnerable senior citizens, right? So there's a very classic case going on in Australia where two of the leading lawyers, along with their accountants, are also being charged with money laundering charges, basically enabling setting up of corporates and companies so that they can launder money. That is going on. And unfortunately, such a small thing like where an accountant was not able to evidence that he was having sufficient policies and procedures to comply with the AML requirements of UK was fined $15,000 apart from $10,000 or so in costs. Just to give you a set of context, we are not very we are not very far as India is concerned. We can see that chartered accountants have been arrested in money laundering cases. ED arrests chartered accountants for involvement in bank frauds. One other thing that I want you to look at it is that it is always in terms of a chartered accountant or any of these professionals, to the extent that either not necessarily as an employee of the organization. Like you can see here, a CFO has been arrested. You're a chartered accountant who is a part of the most of the chartered accountants and other certificate of professionals who are holding those professionals. I myself am a cost accountant. I'm not a practicing professional, right? We don't really get directly into the realm of these things, but as a part of the employees, if we are non-compliant through the organization, we might get pulled up. But people who are holding certificate of practice have to be extra diligent on that. Yeah. So quickly, what is money laundering? I'm not going to spend much time on that. These are all the FATF is a global watchdog. It's a it's a non-governmental organization. And as we speak, India has just completed its review. We are awaiting its anytime. I'm still not, maybe it is out. I've been out of it for a couple, 10 days or so. It's a process of legitimizing the proceeds of crime, which is illegal in nature. The FinCEN says, hey guys, this is just not only economic offense, even something to do with terrorist organizations. Subsequent to the 2001 Twin Tower attack, the IMF says generated by criminal activity to obscure the link between funds and their illegal origins. Here is where, as chartered accountants and as certificate of professional holders, you might be very closely involved because you might be helping them setting up their organizations, like any of those entities, right, to help structure their. So somewhere it is basically to do with the shelf companies and all that. But what does our own Money Laundering Act says, PMLA? Whosoever directly or indirectly attempts to indulge, knowingly assists, knowingly is a party or is actually involved in any process connected with whatever, right? Concealment, possession, acquisition, use and projecting or claiming it as untainted property shall be guilty of offense of money laundering. It doesn't define what money laundering is, but it goes to say what is an offense of money laundering. So if we don't pay particular attention to our respective roles and responsibilities, we'll easily fall into one of these things and then we will be held sort of abetting the crime of money laundering. So we need to be a little more careful about it, right? So who is this? This is Frank Wilson. On the right hand side, you find Al Capone, right? The very infamous, notorious drug lord in the 1930s. He was literally ruling New York for years, right? And then they could really not catch hold of him at all for any of the offenses, right? Franklin Wilson was a forensic accountant, and he used his accounting tools and techniques, and by combination of various his returns and the various expenses and bills, was able to establish some sort of a link, and he was sentenced to prison for 11 years, not for tax fraud, right? Not for the various murders he did or for the drug trafficking. So as a community, the accountants and the professionals should really feel the importance of these things, right? How a notorious gangster was pinned. He was held up for almost 11 years. Then was that he had some life-threatening diseases and passed on. But good part of his thing was only because of some an accountant nailed him. So it is just goes to tell you how important a role we can play. So when we are talking of money laundering, quick one is that you should understand that money laundering is always a second crime. It is not the first crime. The primary crime is something else, right? You take any activity as per the laws of the land. It can be kidnapping, ransomware, your bribery, corruption, insider trading, front running. These are all the first time the criminal acts, right? So on top of it comes the money laundering, because you generate what is called a proceeds of crime, and that you start investing it into your trying to legitimize it. That process is called money laundering. And so the process of generating money is not illegal wealth is not a part of money laundering stages. But what is very important is how do you transition that into a legitimate process, be it the placement, the layering, the integration. There's a classic stuff that goes through in any AML training. I'm not going to spend much time, but I want to tell you that as chartered accountants, you might be able to involve in any of these three layers, right? How to your clients might be generating proceeds of crime, and then we'll just say, how do I make sure that slowly introduce it into the system? How do I transition that? So that's how the placement, and having done that, how do I layer it through a series of transactions and shell companies and all that stuff? You layer it, and finally, because you need to make sure that you enjoy the ill-gotten wealth with some fancy cars and high-profile, beachside villas and all that stuff. So you need to enjoy a good life. So you need to integrate it with your net worth. It has to become a part of your income tax returns. Again, that's where you all play a very good role. So you got a very good role to play across all these things, right? So these may happen not necessarily in the same order. Some of them can stop with placement. Some of them can happen in any different orders. So I'm not going to go into the details of these things. These are all some of the predicate offenses I had put together as to what all could be the offenses that could be very specific to accounting services. I was talking about bribery, corruption, and kickbacks and all that stuff. But very specifically, the clients could be doing any of these things to generate ill-gotten wealth, right? And some of them could also be means by which you can even integrate it to your stuff. So I leave it to your professionals for you all to understand, and then we are not getting much into the details. But is all these things included and all that stuff? Probably not. And that is where I'm giving you a sense of comfort. We'll go on to the next as we speak. This comes from the FATF's discussion, right, on what is called the designated non-financial business professionals, right? There's a very clear categorical stuff, which was basically focusing on all financial services, banking and insurance, securities markets, and the likes. So they have come out with specifically what is non-financial. It focuses on lawyers, notaries, independent legal professionals, and accountants, sole practitioners, partners, and all of them. Right. So they're all, that's how it starts off with it. And FATF is a global organization which is having about some 40 members, of which India is one. And its guidelines are almost like not enforceable, but you have no choice but to enforce. It comes through the respective jurisdictions to implement, and from there to the various regulatory bodies, in this case, the SRBs, like the CA, ICWA, and the CSE Institute, to make sure it works, right? So these are the three statutory bodies which has come out of this, which is primarily held uh, responsible for implementing this very specific thing. The members are the relevant persons who are holding certificate of practice under the CA Institute of 1949, the CS Act of 1980, and also the ICWA Act of 1959. So here, accountants, many of you are all firms or partners in firms, then that should also be applicable to you, right? So which very clearly means that if any of you are all chartered accountants or cost accountants or company secretaries, but not in holding a certificate of practice, then this is something that will not be applicable to you. So what is it? Here we saw quite a few of these things. It's a random list I put to just to sensitize you as to what sort of predicate offenses. The money is generated out of this is where it gets into the mainstream for laundering, but not all of it will be relevant to this. So the relevant person means that the people who are holding a certificate of practice from these of the three statutory bodies, right? They need to do these 5 activities. They or their firm should be doing on behalf of their, say, 3 things, right? First is you have to be a relevant person, which means you should be having a certificate of practice of any of these 3 institutions, right? Then you must be working on behalf of the client in the course of your profession. That is the second one. And the third most important and operative point is you should be involved in any of these 5 activities, right? So it's very important. It's buying and selling of any immovable property, managing of client money, management of bank savings and securities accounts, organization of contributions for the creation, operation, and finally, operation and management of companies, limited liability partnerships or trusts. So this has become effective sometime a little more than a year now, right? So my guesstimate is out of the total number of chartered accountants itself, I think not more than a handful of them, maybe 2, 3, 4% of you might be coming in scope of this. And I'm just taking a guess. I'm not sure. Right. Just to tell you that not all of you will be in scope, but only this, which is slightly different from what is being recommended by FATF in its guidelines or by practice elsewhere. But our PMLA very clearly focuses on this. You can very clearly see that your ICAI, I just picked up one of those newspaper articles which says core accountancy tasks still outside the PMLA ambit. Just to give you just to reiterate that you should be focusing any of these 5. So subsequently after that, we also had another one which was focusing more on the trust and service providers, right? I know quite a few of the chartered accountants, right? It is always a case where you tend to do all the 3, right? Chartered accountants, cost accounting, as well as company secretary. Then it also has got some regulations as to requirements, right? Over and above what it is. So if you are a chartered accountant, you're also doing any of these things as a company secretary or anything, where you're acting as a formation agent, as a director secretary of a company, right? If you're providing a registered office business address, please be very, very careful about this. Some of you might be being a letterbox or a care of address for your clients. That be the case, you need to be a little more careful, right? But I'm not going to get into the details of this guidelines, right? So now getting into the core of this, I hope you all can hear me. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Anonymous attendee, examples of proceeds of crime. I think we have shared it over there earlier. Okay, fine. I just had a quick look at the question and answers before, because we are getting into the core of the charter account. Set a background, what it is, and what the regulations are, right? And I just have to tell you that you got your fantastic FIU guidelines. ICAI has come out with an FAQ. It's so lucidly written, it answers most questions, right? But still, some of these things are going to be addressing those from those sort of inputs. Okay. So the PMLA requirements is that first and foremost, you need to register as a reporting entity, right? Each of the SRBs have got a mechanism. You might have already had one stuff where you may have to go and register in with your CA institute or any other two other institutions as a statutory regulatory body, right? Along with it, you will also register who is the principal officer and the designated officer. We'll talk of the need to have a policies and procedures, but client due diligence, what are the reportable transactions, the importance of training that has to be done. Nodal officers and technical committee very specifically got to do with the SRBs and not with you as a person holding the certificate of practice. And finally, as chartered accountants, I don't need to say so much about maintenance of records because we are damn good at it. And one of our jobs is to go on audit as well, whether based on the records maintenance. So it's like preaching the converted. Absolutely, maintenance of records is something that is very important in this, just like we do it in any other act of ours. So where does it go? Registration of reporting entities. The SRBs will identify the members holding the practice. There is a sort of onus on the SRBs as well, but it doesn't mean that the people, if you're a child holding a certificate of practice, doing any of those 5 activities, then you need to get yourself registered. You'll have to inform principal officers and designated directors. So your designated directors are basically those, if you're an audit firm or something like that, then you'll have a designated director. Typically will be a whole-time director, right? It's mostly to do with a private limited company and the other sort of companies. But if you are a LLP or a firm, association of firms, then I think it will be your managing partner, right? One of the senior person will have to be designated as a principal officer. We'll talk about it. And then you will give the name, fame, phone numbers. Typically, all these things, you register it, and every time there's a change, you need to do it within 7 days, right? So as a organization, as a chartered accountancy, chartered accountant or any other person holding practice, first and foremost is policies and procedures. Remember, I was in the initial thing we are talking about, why we are here. We said that one of the accountants in the UK was penalized because he was not having any policies and procedures. Understand one thing about money laundering as a crime is one of those most difficult ones, right? It is non-bailable. It's non-bailable. It is over and above a secondary crime, and the penalties can be disproportionate to the actual crime or oversight or whatever it is, right? Like for instance, a person has failed to pay a GST for about say 10,000 rupees or 1 lakh rupees, right? It's not like you're going to do something like 1 lakh or so. Then you can say the penalty is about 18% and some sort of a fines. Then you see there's a little bit of proportionality. AML is such a crime that if you don't have policies and procedures, if you don't have any of these things which is mentioned in the FIU guidelines and your CA institute guidelines and all that stuff, the very fact that you don't have it itself means that your entire framework is very low. You're operating in an environment where you don't know what to look into your clients. So that just means that you go and do an audit of your clients, not having any of these things. It just means that you are not adequately skilled. So you're not able to bubble up the potential issues in the various launderers and criminals that is there, who unfortunately, some of them could be lurking around as our clients as well, right? We know what we only get to see. So having a policies and procedures is very important. The couple of quick points is you need to have it. It should be written. You should take care of all your extant regulations, not only that, but also of your ICAI's recommendations and regulations, requirements. And then you have to say what would be a methodology to accept clients, right? You do have an engagement letter. I'm thinking you'll be having an engagement letter or an engagement policy, so that should be also there. What would be the role of an audit and compliance? You are basically an audit firm, right? Let us say, who is going to police the policeman? You need to do that, right? There are some, you have this requirement of doing it once in 5 years. I think you guys know it better, but you need to have a procedure to do this. The policy says that somebody who is a principal officer will have to go on back test, maybe go back to the working papers of your clients and look for it, probably. Yeah. And of course, finally, it talks of your records retention. FAU guidelines, it just says that you need to have a designated director and a principal officer. A talked about briefly, designated director, largely to do with the private and public limited companies. It should be a full-time person, right? And appoint principal officer, a senior person. It's not like a principal officer means somebody who is you don't need to be a company secretary. You don't need to be someone who is very familiar with the process and procedures. Someone's sufficiently senior who can challenge, right? And whose promotions or increments or bonuses are not dependent on who he or she is challenging. Someone who is adequately equipped, right? Please understand that the principal officer is the person who is responsible for everything about it, timely submission. Having said that, that person is only a face to the regulators, but it is everyone's responsibility in the organization to make sure that it is all done. You have to bubble it up to your principal officer and seek their guidance, right? So the accountability, the buck stops there, but it doesn't mean that that's the only person. That person needs to be supported by each and every one of you. Quickly on the KYC and CDD norms, client due diligence. This is something which is the start of any money laundering program, because you need to know your client before you know how much you can trust that person's work. Of course, I need to know the client so that I know what sort of work to do and how much money I can make out of him. That apart, you also need to know what sort of issues that person is bringing to your table. Some of them could be very marquee institutions that can help you when you're just going up the value chain and then you're expanding your business. Some of them can also bring disrepute. So while we will be picking up clients has been a very, very important work that we do as a professional organization. But from a client AML perspective, first and foremost, there are 3-4 things that's very important. First and foremost is your having your policies and procedures and framework apart. First and foremost, know your clients well, right? Having known your clients well, do your transactions monitoring. Having done your transactions monitoring, do your suspicious reporting, and finally have an overall governance around it. So that's what it's all about, right? So very clearly it talks of what's enhanced due diligence, and specifically with respect to high-risk jurisdictions. Some of you could be having branches outside of India and into other locations as well, or your clients might be having some interactions there. Then they all become your high risk. I'll recommend you all to go over to SEBI regulations, or even the recently IRDAI. They also have come out with some things as high risk persons. High risk jurisdictions are very simple, right? At least to start with. I would recommend you all to go to look at the FATF's blacklist and which is prohibited list, and gray list, which is basically a high risk. There's also something called Transparency International. They've got some good. It's a be very careful from where you take it, because I was telling somebody, I often say this. There's something called a World Hunger Index, and India is rated lower than Sri Lanka, and it came during the period where Sri Lanka was not doing well and India was sending them rations out of goodwill, right? So that will be extremely embarrassing, right? Not for us, for the agency that put it up. So we make sure that is trustworthy. So this is the client due diligence. It has to be accurate and up to date. Written procedures, and what is very important is it has to be very specifically risk-based, because you might be having so many of them, but not all of them will be equally risky, right? So first and foremost, it should be one of those 5 things. And within that, you'll have to come out with what is more riskier. Where should we be focusing? Of all the 20 things that the clients will be doing, one or two activities will be much more riskier than what the rest of it is. So this one is very, very important. It gives you where you should be looking at it intently. And enhanced due diligence is specifically coming out of where every business has got a risk. And especially in an audit firm, you're based out of basically a sampling risk, right? You're doing something based out of certain specific transactions, number of transactions, fewer transactions, and probably that might be good enough, right? For you to give you a fair level of comfort in terms of, along with materiality and all that, you'll be able to give an opinion on that. But some of them exposes us to a sampling risk as well. So we need to be very careful as far as such clients, who pose a very higher risk, to say that we need to have an enhanced due diligence, because some of our sampling procedures and the way our auditing methodology also may need to be slightly looked at differently based on the nature of work they do, right? And you might be dealing with some of the clients having not only the high risk jurisdiction, but so-called tax havens, right? Tax havens, it looks like it's really very high criminal and all that stuff. Not at all, right? Basically, these are all very small countries, like you find the likes of Barbados and Cayman Islands and all that stuff. Something like about 20 square kilometers. They have nothing else, and they can't have a place to grow up agriculture, big factories. All they can do is invite people to invest, enjoy their holidays, like casinos, beaches, and all that stuff as a tourist attraction. So as a means, they make it very tax friendly. So there's a push factor from India at 35%. In the countries like Canada, it is about 48%. So it's a push factor from there and a pull factor from there. So that becomes a little thing. It's not bad. It is not like it's prohibited. It's just that you have to be more careful. And one other thing is that there is typically, I have not brought that slide here. There are certain things like very beneficial owners, shell companies. These are all some of the areas that you need to be very careful, other than what is called these tax havens. And most often we also have to understand, whenever you talk of AML, immediately we also talk of what is called a PEP, politically exposed persons. It means a foreign PEP, a domestic PEP, and international corporations. Like you say, if you're a senior officials of the International Olympic Committee, FIFA, and all that stuff, you also will become a PEP. But the Indian regulation says for you to be a PEP, you have to have a person has to be having a foreign country. So it's not talking of a domestic PEP. So it's another one conversation, but not for this evening, but just to give you a sense of high risk. Let me again reiterate, high risk client means just a high risk client, not a prohibited client. So please take a sufficient senior management approval, why you need it, document your stuff, and pay a little more diligent as far as your working papers, what you do, the number of samples, all of these things. Be a little more careful and keep your senior management sufficiently engaged. Sanction screening, again, this is very important, especially at the time of onboarding. Your client, not only your client, but also the businesses they do, where they export, what sort of business they do. Be very careful about if you're dealing with clients who are into doing a lot of these things on the export and import of trades and substances, which is very, very high prone to, like under invoicing and over invoicing, right? So please be mindful of these things, which you would be, but your FAO very clearly calls this out as sanction screening, right? So it is not only you got your OFAC list, you got your UN list. Why OFAC list comes means immediately, that is where when you say sanctions list, because it's about the UN's list, right? Because most of the global commercial stuff is based on the greenback US dollars, so that's where it is. So you got to be careful. Suspicious transactions reporting, when you do all these things, right, you end up with some alerts and all that. So what can cause you suspicion about the whole stuff? It'll say like something is not looking all right. Dal mein kuch kala hai. Probably yes, right? That is what is called a red alert. A red flag. Means something is not looking all right. Like it could be as simple as a transaction going to a high risk jurisdiction, or it is going too often to a high risk jurisdiction, or the amounts are inconsistent, or there has been too many entries and then whatever, right? It is not stacking up, right? You need to develop, for you to create a suspicious transactions, you need to know what are the red flags. So I'm thankful to Kinjal to have provided this stuff, right? Kinjal, I hope it's okay for me to have this, right? I just
Yeah, definitely.
so this is basically for your CA institutes, please. This is where if you log into this place, this is something which is very confidential to us. That's why I am not a chartered accountant myself, so I don't have access to it. But here you have certain guidelines and what could be potentially the red flags. So you should get trained on those specific red flags. When you do that, you will get those transactions which are not in line, not necessarily not in line. There's something that it's like this, suddenly you're feeling feverish. It's okay for now. You're doing it for more than 24 hours, then you may want to go to the doctor. Doesn't mean that something is wrong, but it just starts, be a bit careful. That's what it starts there. And then you do your investigation, then you will get some transactions which sounds suspicious, right? Which seems suspicious. So do an investigation. 3 things will happen, right? When you do a suspicious transactions. A, you will get to know that this is a false positive straight away, right? Like for instance, it will say Krishnan Viswanathan is a sanctioned individual. You go over there, it will say is a person who is 30 years old. And I definitely don't look 30 years old. I have more than 35 years of professional experience. So it is straight away something which is a false positive, because that is why it is. Multiple names, multiple passports, multiple addresses. If you see those lists, the sort of details they provide is that this is a thing you go and investigate and say this is not something that is there. So you're good to go. So you let the transaction pass. The second one is, yeah, it looks a little bit of thing only is farak. So you do further investigation, and then you go over to your principal officer, start engaging with them, and say probably this is it's really something which is a reportable suspicious transaction. Go ahead and report it. So you'll have to go through your CA institute for that, and then please do this. Very important in this is you should maintain absolute confidentiality and tipping off. Confidentiality means nobody else, not even your other people in the organization should know it, purely on a need to know basis, right? Tipping off means your dealings with your client should not alert the client. So tipping off means it could potentially mean that you can also be held as a part of the entire framework as abatement of crime. Please pay particular attention to this. I'm sure many of you who are chartered accountant members will be familiar with this, but still that is there as your stuff. We are almost coming to the end of it in terms of your reporting obligations. Having done all these things, please file your reports, right? You're filing your reports with your FIU through your CA Institute, and 2 things about your filing reports, right? I know your universe is smaller, very restricted. You may not have too many transactions. But what is very important about reporting suspicious transactions is the transaction has to be suspicious. Like for instance, I know there have been instances where some institution some of them will never file anything because they think it is not required, or they will, for whatever reason. Let's not get into that. But some of them will say, let's file everything to the FIU, right? Because let's not get on the wrong side of the law. Sorry, that is not right. You have to really say it is suspicious because of this A, B, C, D reasons, right? So whatever you goes into an FIU's overall data bank, they get it from various reporting entities. I think the reporting entities should be more than 20,000. With the chartered accountants, I don't even have an idea with the chartered accountants, cost accountants, and all of them coming in together. Easily, it could be for 30, 40,000 now. Imagine all of them giving all their transactions would be a lot of work for the FIU. There are only about some 75 odd people, right? And so you have to give them some very, very discerning transactions as with reasons, so that it goes into the data bank, and then they get some inputs from that, and they come out with very good insights. Then that is where they will pass it on to the enforcement directorates or the other regulatory entities for them to do the needful, right? So please be very careful about it. SRBs, the relevant persons are required to verify prescribed through their respective SRBs, right? While the other reporting entities like banks and insurance companies, they have an access to FinNet, they can directly do it. Your certificate of practice holders, please go through your SRBs. SRBs will verify that the person is having a valid certificate of practice before forwarding it to FIU. Why is it very important? Because there could be some 50,000 certificate people who are practicing chartered accountants and cost accountants. So possibly that is why they are doing it. It'd be an administrative challenge. But I think I see no other reason as to why it should be having another layer to this. So these are all the type of reports that is there. Cash transactions. I'm sure you're not going to be doing this. So therefore, there's no counterfeit currencies. You may have cross-border wire transfer. All these things are all certain transaction reports, which typically goes with your reporting entities. And this is my sort of almost the last things where there's a lot of focus on training, right? I'm seeing about some 150 people who are 170 people there. I don't know how many people are watching it through your LinkedIn and all that stuff. But FIU very clearly says that you'll have to provide a training to your employees, right? And the training is at the minimum will be what this is all about. Then, depending upon your nature of business, which sort of segment you're doing it, how would you find what it is and what is reportable, how to maintain confidentiality, how to extract more information from the client without alerting. That's a little bit of a soft skill. It's a combination of everything. You guys are hardcore professionals in your accounting. Just a little bit more in terms of have this understanding of what it means to have a PMLA, what the intentions are, right? Let me tell you one thing. This PMLA, the whole thing comes from FATF, which is the global regulations. From there, it goes to all the jurisdictions. From there, it goes to the various entities. So why I'm saying this is whatever you do here in India will be applicable to most parts of the world. There could be some small little things. You've got 5 activities which is under scope. Maybe another organization may have 7 or 8, right? But the concepts are all the same. Please understand the concepts well, and then the rest of it is easier. Once you do it, all your policies, procedures, periodic review. Periodic review means at the minimum annual. You all know, right? You go what you go and review in your clients' policies and all that. At the minimum annual, as and when there are major changes or changes to the environment, internal or external, or regulations itself, right? So that needs to be done. It has to be approved by the board wherever possible. If it is not approved by the board, it is not the right thing. Again, please don't copy paste. Don't just copy paste your CA Institute or your FIU guidelines. You might say, you might not be compliant to your own policies. Please tailor it to your requirements, right? Records retention, I am not going to spend any much time because you know it too well about the importance of records retention. It's 5 years, your CA Institute and all that stuff. I think it's about 8 years, or tax might be 10 years. I'm not so clued on to it, but you may not be able to differentiate between all these things. So you may keep it for 5 years. It is if you exited the client, you have to keep it for at least 5 years after that person has been exited, right? And whenever something suspicious transactions, some interactions are going on, then it shall not be destroyed until the entire thing is over. So at the end of it, yes, with NISM as a knowledge partner, I'm so privileged and pleased that what started off as a masterclass on AML with a certified anti-money laundering manager. It's a 47 module, 60 hours of training program with a quarterly thing. It's slowly picking up. People say it's even tougher than camps and all that stuff, but that's a little bit flattering. But yes, it's very cost. One great thing about NISM is they provide these courses, very important courses at very, very affordable price. You've got one on KYC, on transactions monitoring. Early this year, we did with accounting professionals, which is again a 5-module course. Last week, we have launched one course for insurance professionals. So this typically is the profile that you have. I'll encourage you all to go into the e-store of NISM. You'll get these things. You'll get a lot more of information. Get the concepts right. Then once you're in the field, it will start coming out because you are the guys who are all there. They say auditors or what you call watchdogs, not bloodhounds, right? So please, this will give you a good idea. Go ahead with this, and then I'm sure we all will have. It's a learning experience, right? So look forward to. I hope you all enjoyed it, and then it was useful. And I hand it over back to Raji. Where am I?
Sir, there are some question and answers.
Okay, let me go over that.
Yes.
Let me go to Q&A first.
Yes.
Can I do career in PMLA through LLB course? Nilkant, I think the career in PMLA is picking up pretty well for you PMLA and all that stuff. Yes, you need to know your concepts better. So figure out some of these courses in IIBF has got, NISM has got a whole range of stuff, CAMPS International, but a lot of it always sits on top of some course like an LLB is a good one. But a lot of experience, get there and pick up your experience and you'll go. Accommodation entries, of course, this is something which has been one of the ways by which proceeds of crime is generated. So I'm telling you one thing is this money loan as whatever that will generate accommodation entries, right? But it has to be, maybe the other panelists, right? Like BCAS can help me out with this, but it should still be within those five activities that is being mentioned. Right? Unexplained cash credits and books of bank accounts. Any of these things will, I think you might, my limited stuff as far as thing is concerned, these are all certain things which leads to generation of proceeds of crime, but it has to be, your role has to be those five other things. In any case, some of these unexplained stuff, you would be flagging it off as a part of an exceptions and then deal with it accordingly. You want to proceeds of crime? There are lots of it here. I don't. Examples of proceeds of crime can be your GST fraud. I think I had it right. Any of the predicate offenses that you saw here earlier, which is very specific to this. I don't have it here, but you name it: tax fraud, tax evasion, front running, cybercrime, ransomware, bribery, corruption. Any of these things are all predicate offenses. I had one slide here. I thought I went through that. This is what? These are some of the proceeds, some of these predicate offenses or the ways by which something is being. A predicate offense means it has to be something which is illegal and something which can be generated. I in a very, very simple terms, anything that will be, which will take you to a criminal liability, right? Like falsification of books of accounts, tax evasions, any of those things. I think I have covered most of the questions on Q&A. So I think I have covered some of these things are very specific to CS. Maybe if anybody from BCAS wants to step in and whether providing professional service to clients, please be very, very careful about this. It is all still something to do with, if you see here, providing a certification, typically they say it is not something which is, attestation is not something which is there, but it also depends upon what you're doing. Be a little more careful whenever you're doing your attestation or certification. It might be seen as one of those points, right, in a larger investigation. The second one is if you're offering your office as a collection center, your post box number, which we do. Some of your clients could be having an international office, or they may be doing international office. They may, but your branch there might be serving some support. Please be a little careful about all these things. Yeah. So Kinjal, anything you want to talk about? Mr. Kinjal, Mr. Shirag.
Yeah, hi, good evening. Yeah, thanks, Krishnan. A very insightful session. I mean, only thing is that the PMLA Act says that it has to be a scheduled offense, and they have listed some 29, 30 odd scheduled offense. And if that offense classifies, I mean, if it is classified to be a particular offense, then the provisions of PMLA would get attracted. So in my view, a simple tax evasion kind of a thing, if there is a charge and you are being prosecuted for evasion of income tax, that is not one of the scheduled offense as of now. But yes, Black Money Act, some of the provisions of the Black Money Act, yes, it has been included in the provisions. And therefore, if that you are being prosecuted for those evasions, PMLA would definitely get applicable. And what is required is here the role of chartered accountant is where as you rightly said, if they are getting into those 5 specified activities, and if they are going to handle it on behalf of their client, I mean, manage it on behalf of their client, that is what would be the starting point of PMLA. So if they are not going to manage clients' accounts, in my view, personally, that the PMLA provisions under the 3rd May circular would not get attracted. But yes, chartered accountant would also have to look at the 9th May circular, which you had highlighted, because that also covers wide range of activities. And they would have to be diligent in their activities on those aspects as well. But overall, Krish, very well covered, very insightful session. And thank you for sharing your valuable knowledge and sparing your time. May I now request Raj Lakshmi to propose a well-deserved vote of thanks.
Thank you, sir. So first and foremost, I would like to extend my heartfelt gratitude to Shri Chirag Doshi for gracing this event with his presence. Your support means a lot to us. I would also like to thank Shri Anand Bhatia for providing us with this wonderful opportunity to conduct the webinar on the behalf of NISM team. A special thanks to Shri Kinjal Shah for his valuable guidance in planning and organizing this webinar, ensuring its success, and also for adding some important insights right now, which you did. Our sincere appreciation goes to Krishnan sir for delivering such an insightful and knowledgeable session. I would also like to express my gratitude to Javed sir and his team for his significant contributions in promoting the event and providing technical support throughout. And a big thank you to the NISM IT team for setting up the online platform seamlessly, making this webinar possible. Lastly, but most importantly, I would like to thank our wonderful audience for taking the time to join us and making this session interactive and lively. And your participation is truly appreciated. Once again, thank you all and have a very good evening.